My name is Mihailo Jovovic. I work for the private independent daily Vijesti, who is the most trusted newspaper in Montenegro. We support NATO accession, but some people say that we are also in the Putin's Red Orchestra, which is to say, which says more about those who do this. But I hope we're doing all right and we are in the right direction. My great pleasure introduce our panelists first. It's Dr. Zbigniew Włosowicz, Deputy Head of National Security Bureau, Poland. Right, the left side, my left. Next panelist is Dr. Julian Lindley French, Director of Europa Analytica from the Netherlands.
Good to see you. Thank
Good
you.
to see you too. We also have my pleasure too to invite on the floor Professor Dr. Milica Pejanović-Jurišić, Minister of Defense of Montenegro. And last but not the least important is His Excellency Ambassador Imants Viestus Liegis, Ambassador of Latvia in Hungary.
Hello, thank you.
First, I would like to tell you how we're going to do this. I'll give a short introduction of the topic, and then I'll ask questions for our distinguished panelists. Of course, during the discussion, you please raise your hands, although I cannot see properly from these lights. But please raise your hands so I can note if you have any questions, which we will leave some time for afterwards. Partnership for Peace. I'll read what NATO says about the Partnership for Peace on its website. Partnership for Peace is a program of practical bilateral cooperation between individual Euro-Atlantic partner countries and NATO. It allows partners to build up an individual relationship with NATO, choosing their own priorities for cooperation, based on a commitment to the democratic principles that underpin the alliance itself. The purpose of the Partnership for Peace is to increase stability, diminish threats to peace, and build strengthened security relationship between individual Euro-Atlantic partners and NATO, as well as among partner countries. Partnership for Peace was founded in 1994, so we're kind of celebrating 20 years of it. While researching for this panel, I saw only few, mostly press releases about it. So either it's business as usual, so there is no much cause for celebration, or something's not going as it should. So we're gonna discuss today how it was, how it is now, and how it will be in the future. My first question I put to Professor Lindley French. Could you please get us back to the 1994? Why the PFP was devised? What goals allies, 16 of them at the time, if I'm not mistaken, wanted to achieve with it? Whose idea was it? And who embraced it more willingly, European or American partners? Or was it just that NATO needed to find something to do, to reinvent its purpose, since there was no more Iron Curtain? Also, how did PFP change over the years, and why? That's lots on your plate, but please start.
Yes, Minister, Chairman, thank you very much. Great pleasure to be here. I'm old enough to remember 1994 as yesterday, so it's not too hard to cast my mind back. to a period which was a period of hope and of tragedy. Hope, the Cold War had come to an end. We talked of a Europe whole and free, a job yet not complete. And yet, as many of you in this room know, this was also an era of tragedy, when conflict once again stalked Europe's lands. Conflict which could not be allowed to fester, which, after all, is NATO's fundamental function, peace and stability. So it was a very different world back in 1994. Yes, there was some dispute about the level of ambition of the alliance in the wake of the Cold War. We had the defence premiums. We had the end of history, you might recall, in 1991, the idea that that was it. But history, as an Oxford historian, never ends. And that's the lessons of the last 20 years and indeed of this year. So Partnership for Peace then achieved its fundamental objective over time, which was to stabilize Europe's territory and its neighborhood, to re-establish the essential relationship between enlargement and engagement, which is the fundamental challenge of partnerships today, and to reinforce the idea of Europe as Europe. The relationship between Partnership for Peace and the Alliance and the European Union at the time cannot be dismissed. This was a vital set of stabilizing relationships. As we can see today, the job is unfinished. If we are truly to re-establish a Europe whole and free, we cannot afford to take our eyes off the ball. But the clue is in the title, Partnership for Peace. Back in 1994, there was a specific strategic context in which the partnership was framed, the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council, all those relationships. To me, today, partnership must embrace two objectives. One, the completion of a stable Europe, not yet complete, as I've said. Two, the recognition that NATO sits at the heart of a worldwide web of democracies, in which there'll be strategic partnerships and stability partnerships. And if we can grasp together that level of ambition, then the alliance will continue to serve its strategic purpose in the 21st century through both membership and partnership.
Thank you. Can you tell us how the Partnership for Peace changed over the years and why?
It changed in terms of the level of ambition. The assumptions in the early years were first to create a waiting room for many nations, some represented on this panel, for membership. Also through security sector reform, to help modernize the armed forces, particularly to ensure democratic control of armed forces, built around NATO standards. And if you ask me what is NATO's core product today, it's not just the values of its shared membership and its shared partnership, but it's that ability to operate together. Now, if you want to see the hard military reality of what partnership achieved, look at Afghanistan, where John had the honor of leading ISAF. The cohesion of ISAF forces would not have been possible without the work of Partnership for Peace in the 1990s. It wasn't simply a stabilizing function, it was a strategic function, and we must never lose sight of that ambition.
Right. Mr. Liegis, what was your, this is the question I'm asking for, I'm putting to all the three other panelists, because their respective countries are all in the Partnership for Peace for different periods of times, and two of those countries entered NATO, one in 1999 and one in 2004. So it seems that every 5 years something happens with those with those countries entering NATO and finishing their path to NATO while in the Partnership for Peace. Could you please tell us, all three of you, what are the experiences of your respective countries in the respective political, economic, social, military context? Did you see PFP just as a NATO prep school or kindergarten, just a step towards the full membership, or was it a way to way to get help in reforming your military and countries as a whole, introducing the standards and the values of the alliance?
Okay, thank you very much. And first of all, I'm very grateful to be able to participate in this panel on behalf of Latvia, and I'm very grateful to the government of Montenegro for inviting me to participate. It's my first time at the Budva conference, and it's a very high-level conference. I'm enjoying it. Partnership for Peace, I think, in many ways embraces virtually all of the things that you mentioned. In Latvia's particular case, when Partnership for Peace was founded in 1994, it was the same year that we had the post-Soviet troops leave our territory. We had regained our independence just 3 years earlier in 1991. And similar to most of the countries that re-emerged after the end of the Cold War, Latvia essentially wanted to return to Europe. And our main foreign policy goals, as stated in 1995, were to join NATO and the European Union. And I think that Partnership for Peace for us was really a stepping stone. It brought us into the fold. I think it was crucial in the sense of starting the road to greater interoperability, certainly, both politically and military. And the engagement with the then partners, the 16 at the beginning, and as we know, shortly after PFP was founded, 5 years later, as you pointed out, there was the first enlargement to Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. And so it was seen for us as that route towards eventual membership. And it was the beginning of also the technical side of joining the alliance and having various discussions with NATO and allies about what needed to be reformed within our military services, in intelligence services, this whole question of public support. And I know that all of these issues are very important for Montenegro. And in our case, and this was the next phase, because in 1999 at the Washington Summit, NATO started this new additional procedure from Partnership for Peace, which was called the Membership Action Plan. And so we were identified as potential members, and as a result of that, the Partnership for Peace aspect continued in parallel, but with a more intense relationship with the alliance. And if I look at it from today's perspective, I think that there is very much a broad range of partners. Julian mentioned the importance of those partners that have been engaged in NATO's operations in Afghanistan. The same can apply in Kosovo. And for us in Latvia, I think perhaps the two most important partners regionally are Sweden and Finland, because we have a lot of also regional cooperation with them. Not to say that the partnerships that NATO has with Russia and the NATO-Russia Council, with Ukraine, the NATO-Ukrainian Commission, are also vital elements of what the alliance is doing today. So, thank you.
Do you think how did you choose the right things from the hand side now? What was the most useful thing you got out of it, and what was the most costly thing you had to pay for?
Well, nothing comes for free, and I think it's as any candidate to join the alliance is aware of, every country that wishes to join has to contribute to the security of the transatlantic area. I think this is Article 10 of the Washington Treaty, and clearly we had to, for us it was not a question of down right-sizing our armed forces because we had to build up our armed forces from scratch.
Soviet.
Yes, yes. And so it was very much the question of gaining the experience, receiving the advice, agreeing to the purely financial commitments about 2% of GDP being devoted to the budget. And I think for us, perhaps the most valuable advice that we were given militarily was to focus on a small force of about 5,000 men and to develop a professional army. We had conscription, we had a conscript system which was not very popular within society, so it was a decision that was taken obviously in close context with what was happening within society. And so we were able to develop a small professional army. And I think for Latvia, and this I think applies to Estonia and Lithuania as well, we were advised not to spend money on aircraft which could police our airspace, and instead the Allies agreed that there would be, as an expression of solidarity from our Allied partners, that they would take over the responsibility for the air policing of NATO airspace in the Baltics. And we've been very fortunate that that has taken place, and I think that was a rational decision, even though from any country's sovereign point of view, it's a difficult decision to make, because you're saying, okay, we're giving the responsibility away from the national government, but I think it was, with hindsight, the right decision to make.
So, hello
The same
everyone,
question?
good afternoon, and I will be adding on what already was said, starting from the point that actually the topic of today's panel, which is Partnership for Peace, is a topic which is clearly showing that North Atlantic Alliance, NATO, is a very flexible international organization. So that is maybe something not many people would be recognized at the first sight, but everything we've already heard today here is showing that NATO is the organization which is actually continuously adapting itself. So starting from the main objectives, which were directly linked with the end of the Second World War, we were coming to the Cold War, and then right after the Iron Curtain was fall down, we were having Partnership for Peace initiative and the program, which actually was directly targeted towards this vision of Europe in peace, whole and free. And that is something we are still doing today. And I've got to say that actually Partnership for Peace is initiative, and I want to stress out that it's initiative. It's not a structure, organization, or a forum or something like that. So this initiative offers to all of us a lot of possibilities. But we've got to have in mind that despite the fact that we are having a clear vision where all we are going with performing a number of activities, that Partnership for Peace is a program and initiative firstly targeted towards military objectives. So there is a number of possibilities there which are very valuable, especially valuable for the countries which are in some, and which were in some phases of transition, overall reforms, where we've got to admit ourselves, we didn't have enough knowledge, enough of experience to implement reforms, such as reforms linked with, say, democratic control of the armed forces, reforms of the intelligence sector, reforms in the spending of resources when defense and security are concerned. So all kind of help there proved to be really very effective. But then, of course, as the time passes by, NATO, as I said, a very flexible organization, found out and recognized that some additions should be made. And that's what is the Washington Summit in 1999, where actually the whole process is a little bit adjusted further on to the reality, and new mechanisms were introduced. There are first think about the MAP process and Membership Action Plan, which actually within that initiative of our Partnership for Peace introduce new categories, introduce the possibility that being a part of Partnership for Peace, you can make a choice. Whether you'll be just a partner, cooperate on military issues, on the issues which you somehow evaluate as something and assess as something that might be useful for you, with no obligations, with no real, I would say, benchmarking in what you are doing. Or you can go a step forward towards being a kind of candidate country for what is the next step in Euro-Atlantic integrations. So when it comes to Montenegro, it's all clear that our choice was quite sound, and starting from the very beginning, from 2006, and becoming the full, I would say, part of the Partnership for Peace program, we were going further on, and now hopefully we will be coming to the 5th MAP cycles, and we will be showing in that way that being a part of this process, we adopted also the other dimensions, not only the military one. Because the basic difference between being just a partner or being a kind of candidate is in extending the way of cooperation and collaboration. So we come a long way ahead, because we extended our cooperation towards reforms which are not only in the military sector, which are in other sectors, starting from the rule of law, starting with the public understanding of what is the NATO as alliance, starting with all which is related with spending of the money of our taxpayers, and then coming further on towards being a part of the global security system. And that is where I think Partnership for Peace is showing great vitality, and showing how important it was for us to go step by step, phase by phase, to be more ready in order to be a part of that global environment where we will be ready through using all those mechanisms to be a contributor to the global security. And I'm very proud of the fact that in a relatively short period of time, from 2006, Montenegro managed what this vision was. So today, Montenegro is a part of the countries which are contributing for the global peace and security. Maybe there is some of us and among us who are still asking themselves and asking ourselves, what is the difference actually with the Partnership for Peace program and the NATO membership, and whether it's worth going further on? And I believe that with a number of things I already said, that there is enough argument showing that actually it is indispensable to go forward. It is always a kind of a good incentive, a good motivation that is driving us forward towards changing the environment we are living.
Thank you. Could you just tell us what was the hardest thing to do for you in those reforms? Was it the military? Was it some other things? Or you can just concentrate on the military for now. Was it the way of thinking, the way of being more effective? What was the harder things? Was it the convincing people how to do things? Or although you were not the minister at the time?
Yeah, I'm quite short time. A minister relatively, I would say. Maybe from some other parameters we could say too long. But anyway, I've been involved in many activities, as you do know, in the past as well. And personally, I am not talking about these things in these terms. There is no hard, no less hard issues. There are commitments, there are efforts, or there is no commitment. And when Montenegro is concerned, and I've got to say, all different sectors in the government of Montenegro, there is clear commitment. And that makes our tasks not being hard one. So it is very important to recognize what is needed. One is recognized, there should be appropriate action plan, and I think that our annual national plans already showed in all these cycles that we were and still are very much aware of what it should be done, and the results are very obvious. So when it comes to the defense sector, of course, it is not needed from myself to do the assessment. We've got external assessment from other NATO member countries which are all the time with us and which are helping us, of course, but on the other side doing the assessment and evaluation, and the results are very positive. So from that point, that is what counts. no matter whether it's difficult or not difficult, we are able to recognize what is needed, we are able to find the ways how to implement that. We didn't have any major problems, despite the fact that you could have been expecting that. I mean, having in mind that in 2006, we didn't actually start it from the scratch, but started from some situation which wasn't very advantageous from the point of the final target.
Can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
Speaker of the Montenegrin Parliament said that we did better in the military sector when we inherited, as he said, foreign army than in some other sectors. Why is that? Do you agree with that, or?
I
If you agree.
could not agree completely. I don't know now. I just don't like interpreting the statements which I didn't hear. But what I wanted to say, and maybe somewhere there is a synergy in this kind of thinking, is that actually we could have been expecting that it will be very difficult, as we didn't starting from zero, but starting from some heritage which wasn't very much in favor of what our vision was. But I mean, with a very clear commitment and very clear determination to go forward when these strategic foreign policy priorities are concerned, we managed. So that means that actually the people who finally have made the choice to stay here and to work in the army forces of Montenegro were completely aware what the vision is and what should be their commitment. And by this time, they, I would say, did it in a way which was definitely assessed as a positive one, and the atmosphere in the armed forces, in the Ministry of Defense is, I would say, exemplar one when it comes to the implementation of reforms and of this strategic goal.
Right. Dr. Vlasovec, could you please tell us about the Poland's experience, and especially in the context of this NATO kindergarten thing? Was Poland, Czech and Hungary military, intelligence and other sectors really ready for NATO after only 5 years of preparation?
We were good students, actually, but I fully agree with what has been
and also, sorry,
said
and
on
also
that.
there were less conditions for
Right.
going into NATO. And was it maybe more the political decision than based on merits? We are talking about Partnership for Peace as a prep school for the NATO.
Right. Well, thank you so much. But let me first tell you that in a couple of days, in Poland, we will celebrate the 25th anniversary of regaining our independence. And there will be a lot of festivities back at home, because what I wanted to say that people do enjoy the fact of making the right choice or right choices in the right time and actually sticking to them. That's probably the most important part, to stick to that. So 25 years ago, we made our choices, and NATO was an obvious choice. It's hard to find a better guarantee of security than those guarantees of security than those stemming from the most powerful alliance in the world. So the day when we joined was certainly one of the most significant moments in the modern history of Poland. And let me tell you my personal experience on the day of us joining NATO. I was Polish ambassador to the United Nations, and we had a parade on Fifth Avenue together with colleagues from Hungary and Andrzej Erdos and Sasha Vondra of Czech Republic, together with Governor Pataki. We were marching in the center of Manhattan. That was very, very powerful. And what is very important in our case is that for 25 years, from day one actually till today, we have had a political consensus on being a part of NATO. And we've never slowed down. We have never experienced a crisis about the way we thought about NATO since day one till today, that you can easily see witnessing the debate on the Ukrainian crisis. But it has been a process no doubt. I like that term prep school because I myself thought of ourselves as students then, but we were working really hard. We were determined. I would actually, I'm sure I would say that on behalf of other nations like our Lithuanian friends, we were really determined. As I said, we never slowed down. The process of smoothly growing into the alliances structures, both political and military, the procedures, habits, culture of debate, that was something very much new to ourselves. General Allen could tell us much more about that. He witnessed so many partners in Afghanistan, and he knew very well how quickly they learned and how hard they tried to catch up with the Premier League. And of course, it has not happened overnight, and we haven't done that by ourselves. And that's when the partnership comes to the scene. The 5 years that we have spent in that program gave us practically everything that we needed to join NATO as a partner. I do not think that we were easier than the others. You have to think. I talk about Polish perspective, and you were asking about challenges. To cut the army down to 100,000 from what used to be 400,000 of conscripts, to professionalize them, to modernize them, it is an amazing task. We actually did it, and I think we have every right to be proud of that. One more thing, if I may, we didn't do it alone, as I said. We were given so much experience, skills, and knowledge from our partners in the program, Partnership for Peace program, and that's what I think was the initial form of pooling and sharing. That was actually the first time that we were pooling and sharing, not so much capacity in terms of resources, but intellectual and basically knowledge. And now the time is to repay, of course, and we have a lot to offer that we gladly do together with other nations that, like ourselves, joined NATO not so long ago. But what I wanted to emphasize and repeat again, the pace, determination, and energy that has been put into that project has never changed. Or who knows, maybe it's growing even now. Thank you.
Mr. Lillifranc, you had something to add?
Yeah, I wanted to come back, if I may, on this issue of prep schools, probably because I've seen what damage English prep schools can do. I think it's very important that we get away from this idea that somehow the Partnership for Peace program was a gift from the existing members to aspirant or new members. The Cold War was won by the people of Central, Eastern Europe, and indeed of this region. Let's remember that this was something that the peoples of Europe together won. What Partnership for Peace did was emphasize an importance that we really cannot forget today. The point of the alliance, of the EU, of OSCE, indeed of the United Nations, is an institutionalized system of security that stops extreme state behavior. The sort of extreme state behavior we saw in the 19th and 20th century, which wrought havoc across Europe. And that's why partnership isn't simply an addition to the alliance, it goes to the very center of the ethos of the alliance. And sometimes when I speak to my colleagues, particularly in some of the older, tired, shall we say, Western European countries, you get that sense. But having worked on the planning and review process with my great friend Diego Ruiz Palma during the late 90s in NATO, having looked at all that and now thinking of the part today, it would require a very different level of mindset, a very different ambition. I'll give you an example, if I may, Chair. On Friday, I stood on the bridge of HMS Dragon, a brand new Type 45 destroyer. Even the US Navy is a bit jealous of our Type 45. In July, I will be attending the launching of HMS Queen Elizabeth, our new super aircraft carrier. What worries me is that partnership must not become a lay-by, a cul-de-sac for forces at a lower level of capability. The new partnership, the new strategic partnerships, must be built on the ability to maintain interoperability of our forces in the age into which we are going. And that includes not just members, but partners. Why? Because I can see a situation where the United States will be stretched thin, and Europeans in particular will be required to take on much more responsibility as first responders, all of us in this region. So partnerships must be reinvented. That's partnership between NATO and EU, building on the relationship with the United Nations of 2012, building on our relationships with other institutional centers of security. So in a sense, we've got to reconceptualize our ambition for the partnership, because if we don't, the alliance itself will suffer.
Right.
Could you please tell me?
For example, Russia is a partner. Could we say that at
Yes.
this moment? Questions for everybody. I mean, what do you think? Can Russia return to PFP, and when?
I sat, if I may, Minister. A few years ago, I had the honor of being plonked in front of the Deputy Defense Minister of Russia. This is about 2001-2. I was late to this dinner. It was a NATO dinner, and there was a strange empty seat right in front of the Deputy Minister, which I was ushered into. So I thought, being me, I will ask the Minister a direct question. I said, well, Minister, are you part of European security or a problem for it? And through the interpreter, she smiled, and she understood my question. She liked my directness. And she said that Russia will always be open to partnership, but will always have its own interests. One has to recognize now, at this moment of crisis, that there is a certain role the alliance must play in absolutely assuring the Kremlin of our determination to defend allies, no question. But the door must always be open, subject to finding political solutions to a renewed partnership. The last panel talked much about who lost Russia, and there was always this idea that somehow we in the West lost Russia. Well, yes, we've made mistakes. But having been over in Russia several times and gave a speech in front of Gerasimov and with Lavrov last year, my sense is that the mood of the Kremlin right now makes it very hard for us to really move that agenda forward until this current crisis is resolved. Of course, Russia is an integral part of European security and therefore central to all sorts of partnerships. But my sense is, and I suspect it could only happen by a US-Russian summit, until there are solutions found to this specific crisis, that all discussions of partnership with Russia are on hold. Just to conclude this, I sat in several meetings in the 1990s and the early noughties where it was clear that what Russia wanted was a veto over the modernization of the alliance, whether it's the modernization of Article 5, perfectly legitimate modernization, or indeed the shape of its memberships and partnerships. Russia must always be consulted, but Russia, sorry, can never have a veto on the relationships that free sovereign states choose as part of an alliance of democracies.
I'll try to connect.
Just one remark, if I may. NATO is a security project, but NATO is about values. And we have those quite clearly written out. It's about democracy, it's about human freedoms, it's about in any case, the values of a democratic world are dear to us. And the project is open to those who share the values with us, let me put it that way.
But yeah, but
Yes,
yeah, please.
if I may. So what I just wanted to add in a way is that when we are talking about these different instruments and talking about Partnership for Peace, as we all said before, we are talking about the instrument and the program which is giving these military opportunities and of course which are basically targeted towards interoperability. But on the other side, when we are coming prep school or not prep school, but the next level, I would say, we are adding this political content. And that is what NATO is about. So that is at least how we do understand NATO. So it's a political organization with also military content, very important one, which is based on building democracy, developing democracy, general freedoms, human rights, to share the values which are related with the free societies. So if we just go technically through what is needed as a sort of criteria when you are advancing towards adopting those values, then you will see that NATO is offering us actually a framework and opportunities which are, despite the thing that are complementary with the EU, with the United Nations, with the OSCE, are not treated like that when you are joining other political organizations. I mean, in EU we are having 34 chapters for negotiations, but in none of those chapters you are having the issues as we are dealing with now in the MAP process. When I say that, I mean resources, security sector, intelligence sector, defense sector, the way how we'll make our public opinion to understand certain issues, that is not present in other processes. So this is that added value of NATO which will help to structure us as a democratic society. So from that point, I mean, even in the invitation letter for the Partnership for Peace process is clearly said that everyone who is entering the process will be actually having an opportunity to go further on in integration. That is also the Article 10 and all the others. And as Montenegro being well advanced in the process now, we are really relying on that opportunity which is given to the countries which are part of the Partnership for Peace. And we do believe that we are somewhere now at the moment where, as you, Professor, also said, NATO should reinvent itself. We should use this opportunity, which is, of course, not very positive one, but still it's there. It's a challenge, maybe more, with this biggest crisis we are having after the Cold War in Europe. So that is a challenge for NATO to reinvent itself. This is a challenge for NATO to show that actually there is a possibility for some kind of its internal, I would say, renaissance. So we are talking about transatlantic relations. We are talking about those relations that helped rebuilding Europe after the Second World War. I hope we didn't, of course, we didn't live at that time, but we know a lot about that. And we can claim even nowadays that it was essential and critical for the Europe we are living today. And that's why we do believe that there will be enough of wisdom to go further on and to use this challenge, I said, which is raised in front of all of us, to find the new ways and new means. And the very important part of giving the right response to that challenge is the enlargement policy. And that is where we'll come to the point that NATO as international organization, with all these advantages, with all these benefits, with all these obligations which are having the content, is actually at this right moment in a position to show whether it is a credible organization or not. When I say that in all documents of the NATO alliance, it is written that all the countries who are sharing the same values, who are contributing to the global peace, will be evaluated and assessed in terms of their preparedness on a merit-based value. So, of course, there is always politics, but politics is there to serve for better life of our citizens, to serve for creating conditions for all other reforms that should be implemented. And that's where I really do believe that at this very moment we are having a great challenge for NATO and for all and the complete politics which are performed and implemented in that framework.
Can I just before we continue with the, could you somebody mentioned NATO was okay with the people getting partnership, countries getting partnership for peace, but when time comes to consider the membership of those countries, they object, and as a result of object is a diplomatic way of putting it. But when it comes to that, there are problems. Even there is a saying it takes two to tango, but in this case, I think it is three to tango. Yeah, because even NATO allies cannot agree what to do with this, whether to continue enlargement or not. This is maybe not our topic, but it's interesting from you, Minister, to hear that, especially in the case of Montenegro, because we had some recent, how should I say, clashes with Russia, verbal, unfortunately.
No, I don't think that we had clashes. I think that we had one situation where Montenegro showed in many ways, as it was the case before, that we are very much determined in implementing what are our foreign policy goals related with, of course, domestic and internal policy the government of Montenegro is implementing. So from that point, I do believe that it is completely in line with our strategic orientations, that we are sharing the values of European Union, and the NATO alliance are joining the forces in trying to create an environment where all kinds of problems would be resolved in a diplomatic and peaceful manner. So I don't believe that there is anyone in this hall this morning or anywhere around us who would, support any kind of aggression from whatever party is coming and to whoever is objected. Especially we here in Balkans, with all the experience we are having in the past, I think that we are having a special obligation to be at the side where everyone will be recalled that there are other means and ways to resolve any eventual problems. So from that point, I do believe that the crisis we are having at the moment, I said intentionally we, meaning Europe, as I do consider Montenegro be a part of Europe, and I do consider that we are having just a certain institutional obligations to fulfill in the next period, to have a kind of institutional part in these alliances. But anyway, you do know that Montenegro was always in the region and above the region, very, very much motivated to contribute towards resolving the problems, to export, in a sense, what is our experience in resolving all these potentially very complex relations between different ethnics, between different political parts of our population. And I think it's a great value that Montenegro is having in its real substance among its population. That's why I do believe that going forward, there is no other way but to continue with the reforms we are doing, to continue with the communication with all our partners, so that they could be completely aware that Montenegro is not seeking for its place in these international organizations because we want some kind, I don't know how to express that, maybe protection or whatsoever. No, it's genuine into our substance that we do believe we are making part of Europe, we are making part of the countries which are democratic, we are making part of the countries which want to contribute that the world would be a better place for our children tomorrow. And that's why we'll continue with this kind of communication. We'll, of course, at the first place, we'll continue with what we are doing already inside Montenegro, because we do believe that is the best way to show how serious we are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Something to add about
Thank you very much. I mean, I'd like to, welcome and support very much what the Minister has just said, because I think that Montenegro has made a very clear choice, both vis-à-vis the European Union and NATO. And when we look at the question of the stand that the European Union may make about sanctions against Russia on Ukraine, then Montenegro made its choice quite clear on that as well.
Restrictive measures.
Restrictive measures, call them restrictive
Yeah,
measures.
There
Okay.
is a difference.
Yeah, sure. But but I think that Latvia, unlike Montenegro, is a neighbour of Russia, and all of our countries have to not only formulate the way in which the larger group works out its position vis-à-vis relations with Russia, and I'm coming back to your question about how do we deal with the partnership with Russia. But I think that we also, in parallel, have our bilateral relations, whether one country suffers more from restrictive measures than other countries, dependency on energy. Poland has been very successful to my mind, in bilaterally having a group of Russian and Polish people who work on the difficult issues between Poland and Russia, and I think that has been a very successful model, and we've, from our perspective, have looked at it with a lot of interest. But I think today, if we look at what's happening today, I mean, it is quite clear that we're in a totally new security situation. We discussed this in the previous panel about Ukraine, because we have had, the values that were shared after the end of the Cold War have really gone out of the window because of Russia's actions against Ukraine and taking over illegally and occupying the territory of Ukraine in Crimea, where I think our approach has to be very, very clear. Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania were occupied by the Soviet Union for over 50 years, and the United States, many European countries, had a policy of never recognizing that we were legally part of the Soviet Union. This is exactly the same model that we have to use vis-à-vis the illegal incorporation of Crimea by Russia, that it should never be recognized as legally being a part of Russia. It's important of course, to continue. Russia is an extremely important partner. Russia is a member of the Security Council. It has nuclear weapons, but it's very unfortunate that it's being led at the moment by a president who seems determined to really put across and establish the position of Russia over and above and really go against the values that I think most Western democracies accept.
Right. Is there any questions? Or we can continue? Gentleman over there.
Okay, from 1998 to 2001, I'm going to put on my old defense. My name is Vytautas Butrimas, Ministry of Defense, Lithuania. From 1998 to 2001, I was Defense Policy and Planning Director, and very much involved in PFP, NATO integration, membership action plan. We had to come up with a military strategy. It was one of the requirements in my department, which we succeeded in doing in 2000. And one of the biggest arguments when I had to go to Brussels and talk to an assistant secretary of NATO was to answer the criticism, of course, the values, market economy, civilian control, the military, and so forth. But one of this was, can Lithuania defend itself? I mean, does it have a capability to defend itself? And this is one of the things we really were working hard in PFP to convince NATO that we are not going to be a liability when we join the alliance, but an asset. And we said, we have a 24,000-man National Volunteer Defense Force. We built 4 barracks for training conscripts, 2,000 a year, trained by British NCO officers. We were purchasing anti-tank, anti-aircraft equipment, and we were really demonstrating our capability. And then 2004 came, and it was sort of like, exams are over, we passed the exam. And then I went on to a different position, and I saw that we were going to a professional army. We were dropping the volunteer and conscription program. We were not using the 4 barracks. We were using 1 barracks to train conscripts. And the security climate was changing during the Putin years, and it's almost like the feeling, in not just Lithuania, but in Europe, European members of the alliance. We're in the alliance. Thank God for the United States of America. You know, if something goes wrong, they're going to come in. And I say to myself, what? Why should we expect the United States of America to come in to a problem that's really in the European member of NATO backyard? I mean, they've been through two wars. They've got their own problems. And we were grateful to the United States. They sent their jets to the Baltics during the Russian-Ukrainian crisis. Troops are on the ground in the Baltics. And I say, what's the European reaction? Where are their troops? Where are their jets? And the Danes have sent their jets in. But I'm hearing, this 2% in the previous panel, it's maybe not that important. I think this is a real problem for the alliance, and you should read Robert Gates' book, former defense secretary. When he left, he always says things, the wake-up call has been given to NATO, and especially the European members. What are we going to do to respond to the challenge? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions for now?
Yes, Hall Gardner. It seems to me the Partnership for Peace is something that's been the most underutilized, and it has tremendous potential that's never been implemented. Now, the previous panel, we discussed the possibility that Partnership for Peace forces could go in to secure eastern Ukraine or elsewhere in that problem if once the dust settles. Other proposals were for a Partnership for Peace in the frozen conflicts in the Caucasus. I could even see Partnership for Peace forces between Israel and Palestine if you can ever get a settlement there. My point is that this element of peacekeeping shouldn't lose out to the other element of the need for a greater strategic integration that Julian talked about. So I was just wondering, why hasn't the way we've talked about it is Partnership for Peace is a way to integrate into NATO, but yet it has this other potential that in my mind hasn't been utilized. And I was just wondering, A, could it be utilized and expanded in this way? And B, are there bureaucratic restraints or something else preventing it from moving in that direction? If you follow me.
Could you just introduce yourself at the end?
Yeah, Hall Gardner. I spoke at the previous panel. Thank you.
Yes, if I could just, because you mentioned, I think, an interesting point about Partnership for Peace perhaps being underutilized. I was just looking through some work documents in preparation for this panel, and during 1 week in the first week of May, the Partnership for Peace NATO headquarters had meetings with Ukraine, Japan, Montenegro, Armenia, and Egypt. And I think really that is an answer to your criticism or your implied criticism that it's perhaps not being used sufficiently. I mean, my sense is that the NATO headquarters is dealing with it in an extremely serious way. And I think that's an illustration of the ongoing success, not only the enlargement having been a success. And I think Partnership for Peace today has really become an element of the broader cooperative security that was placed into the strategic concept, where other partners that may not be in PFP, but those that have joined operations in Afghanistan are being drawn in, partners like Australia, New Zealand. And I just want to come back to one thing that Julian mentioned, which concerned me a little bit, because he said that perhaps partners should be the first to respond to some sort of crisis, and perhaps not. It shouldn't be so much the alliance. Well, I would really beg to disagree with that, because of course, it depends on the situation. Obviously, the alliance is a military alliance of collective defense. I would hate to think that any responsibility for the collective defense of the alliance should be given to partners who were not part of the NATO alliance. And whilst it is extremely important to embrace, cooperate with other partners, I think that if we go down the road of either regionalizing defense in parts of Europe, this would only weaken the very important transatlantic link and the engagement of the United States and Canada in the alliance, which is so crucial for upholding peace and security in Europe.
Can I respond directly to that, please? Emmett, my friend, you completely misunderstood what I said. What I said was that given the nature of the pressures on the United States, given the likelihood of American strategic calculation being complicated by its global responsibility, that Europeans collectively will need to be in a position where we can be credible first responders to crises in and around our border. That's my point. And the essential point is that the relationship between membership and partnership is evolving. Now, take operations in Afghanistan for the last 10 years or so. We've had a situation where we've had partners on occasions more capable than members. And that leads to a certain evolution of the formal relationships between decision-making and decision-shaping of alliance operations plus. Now, one, we have a very narrow window opportunity to really capitalize on the collective corporate memory that we gained from the campaigns in Afghanistan together before that's lost, to give a real sense of strategic partnership built on campaign experience, whether it's ISAF or operations in the Indian Ocean or elsewhere. So it's vital that we build on that effectively worldwide web, because what is NATO's fundamental selling point? It's command and control, and how we generate forces and command those forces. There's nothing like it in the world, and if we can establish that quickly, it will make the generation of coalitions much more effective. Now, why do coalitions matter? Well, it comes back to the point from my Lithuanian colleague, though I have to say, sir, as a Brit, I get somewhat irritated by you always saying it's all about the Americans. I've just written a piece. Sorry, John, but you know, I've just written a piece pointing out that there were more British troops landed on D-Day than American troops, and the whole thing was 80% planned by the British. So, you know, it's a collective effort, the alliance, and I'll have something to say about that. Good man. And the Americans always operate more effectively under British command.
This is below the belt.
We are indeed an alliance, and have been. The essential point is that the 2% commitment is a commitment to seriousness. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has to have the same capabilities. What really worries me right now, and here's where I get very contrary, as I've been accused of my friend the ambassador here on occasions, is that there is a divergence of strategic cultures across the alliance, which was apparent at occasions on operations in Afghanistan with all the caveats. What we need to be sure, whether we're a partner or a member, that we are together at the point of contact with danger. And if our governments can be absolutely sure that that indeed will be the case, we will commit to each other far more effectively. If we're looking at each other in a after you please kind of way, which has been on occasion, let's face it, the reality, then I fear the alliance will disaggregate itself. That's why in my question in the previous panel, I made the point that this is not just a crisis, it's a crisis of our crisis management. And we've really got to look ourselves very squarely in the collective faces and say, how do we fix this? Because the alliance is ultimately built on the credibility in the minds of allies and adversaries and partners. And I'm pretty sure that President Putin and his advisors calculated before they took their action that in fact we lack unity of effort and purpose. And without that, whatever you spend, whatever the values you share, whatever your intent, then you simply do not have the capability to match your will and achieve your political objectives. And that's where the alliance is right now. We need strong members, but we need a set of strategic partners which inform those values and those political objectives now, not back in 1994.
Just to add to that, I found some of your quotes which are maybe very good for. I read one of them. Europeans are conducting an experiment in security policy, replacing security instruments with political correctness in the hope that it will act as a security policy tool.
Yes.
It is very, very harsh. I'll try to go back to the money, which gentleman from Lithuania brought up. And I also found some interesting data. Why is that? Question for Minister and you. Why is that Latvia, who is the member of NATO, according to the CIA fact book, on the 105th place with 0.92% of the GDP spending on defense, which is significantly smaller percentage than Montenegro, who is in Partnership for Peace. It could go both ways. I mean, the collective security could be cheaper than individual security. So Montenegro is 45th place with 1.87, almost as Poland in 44th place with 1.92. The data is from 2012. I think
2012.
12.
Well, I would agree with what you said, that actually this issue of 2% is an issue of commitment. Of course, there as well, the Partnership for Peace give us opportunities to better understand what we are talking about, to better adjust what are the possibilities, and to better adjust our budgets. Actually, it's not done just for fulfilling some formal criteria. It is in a very close correlation with what are the objectives. So once you are in this process of Partnership for Peace, once you are working on your PARP and you are doing the process of planning and revision of the plans you are doing together with our NATO partners, then you are having the possibility to recognize what you have to do. And I would like to say that actually I'm not sure that this process is completely adopting what we are usually talking in a way of some mantras already, like, you know, smart defense, pooling and sharing, coordinating forces. It's still very much rhetoric and it's still very much theory. And that is where I see a great space for this, what I said before, this new reinvention of NATO, because we've got to really implement what we are talking about. And then I'm quite sure that the issue of percentages will be somehow less important, because we'll put on the paper what is needed in the sense that we are having collective security there and collective means of providing security to our citizens, and then it will be much more clear having on the other side what are the possibilities of each of the countries, having in mind how serious is the crisis in each of them. That is the point also where alliance like NATO should show some kind of solidarity. So having all the elements, there is enough space to have a kind of optimization and the kind of providing what is simply something like a business plan. So we are talking about the money, so why don't adopt the methodology which is proven to be very much successful in other projects? And that's why I think that all kind of stacking us into claiming who is contributing more or less, it's not productive at all.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I will like to explain that I had the unfortunate distinction of being Minister of Defence in a Latvian government in 2009, when the country was on the verge of bankruptcy. We had suffered a very severe financial crisis. We had lost, GDP was minus 19%, and we were salvaged by the International Monetary Fund and the European Union. We were bailed out. In the negotiations with the IMF, the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister on a Saturday in April of 2009 came out of the meeting on a Sunday when we had a governmental meeting and said that this is now what the budget is going to be, and defence was cut by virtually 50%, and the budget was reduced to just under 1%. Now, Latvia has very successfully, through austerity measures, got out of this financial crisis, and on the 1st of January this year, we joined the euro. There is now, of course, the political necessity and recognition that more needs to be devoted to the defence budget, and because of that, the government has given a political commitment to raise defence to 2% by 2020. So that commitment is on the table. We're obviously in continual discussion with our partners about how to move towards increasing the defence budget, and so it will be. I think that it's very important to know that at first there has to be no further reductions, so we maintain the level. Our problem is that, of course, GDP is now growing, and it means that more money has to be devoted also to defence, which is...
It should be an advantage, not a problem.
Well, exactly. I fully agree, but persuade the finance minister that that's the case. So, of course, when we went through that crisis, I mean, I think that it gave the opportunity. I had to prioritise what are we going to spend the money on, which is what every defence minister has to look at. And in our case, the priority was to maintain the troop levels to our contribution to ISAF, and that was very important. This is a problem for Latvia and other European members of the alliance. Latvians always look north and are very envious of what happens in Estonia, who have currently a level of 2%. And I know, having spoken with colleagues, as a result of that in NATO meetings, who gets taken more seriously when discussions take place, and we're asking for more reassurance measures or things like that. Obviously, people listen more to Estonia because of their political commitment.
Financial? Yeah.
In any case, we will not avoid a serious debate on financial aspects of our security. I mean, in the European context, both.
Excuse me, just to interrupt. Sorry for that. Did you pay more when you were until 99 or after 99?
I'm sorry.
Before.
Did you pay more money for defense? Did Poland pay? I lost that data.
Did I?
Did you pay more percentage of the budget, of the gross domestic product for defense before 99, before you become the member? Yeah.
No, now we pay more.
Now we pay more. Right.
Yes. But what I wanted to say is the European or transatlantic context of security, both in NATO and in the European Union, since the way of thinking about it is more or less the same. And here, my sort of pet topic, pooling and sharing and smart defense, that Madam Minister already spoke, which seems to be a perfect recipe for our problems, yet it in fact does not work. We do a lot of talking about pooling and sharing. We do a lot of pooling and sharing, but on a small scale. Pooling and sharing or smart defense will bring some advantages when it's serious. When we talk about cutting something out and getting something on, we have to give something up and get something else. Those decisions are not for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Those decisions for certain nations are forever. If you give up your air forces, you give them up forever, practically. If you give up your naval forces, the same stuff. And I think that we were living in a way, dream that we would be able to do that, to divide the jobs, to get and distribute capacities among members, and everything would be perfect. And now in the new security environment, during or after and during the Ukrainian crisis, we sort of start wondering. And the debate is still
Because
ahead of us.
it's not being prepared.
Right,
That's what
precisely.
Anticipation.
So the debate is still in front of us. We will not avoid it. And the sooner we do it, the better. The more leadership is being shown on that, the better. I'm not that optimistic that we will have things sorted out after the summit in Wales, but we do have to go in that direction and to show that there is a determination to do so. Poland is as you mentioned, is in a rather good shape as long as our financial requirements, internal financial requirements are concerned. So we stick to 2%. And again, the good thing is that we have backing of all political parties on that. Thank you.
You wanted to say?
Yeah, we didn't answer Hall's question about Partnership for Peace Forces, which was quite an interesting idea. I wouldn't put it that way, Hall. I would say, look, one of the fundamental functions of the alliance is as a force generator. Now, what you want to give your political leaders in a moment of crisis are political options that give you the shortest distance between crisis and solution. Now, there are many places in and around Europe where you wouldn't want to put a force under a NATO flag or an American flag or even an EU flag, although I think having the EU option is hugely important in terms of the political identity it communicates, or indeed an OSCE flag. The point is that the main thing is to have the capabilities that you can deploy in the appropriate political environment with a UN Security Council resolution having been agreed, hopefully, to establish, prevent warring parties in conflict, those kind of issues. The idea that it would be a PFP would be effectively a NATO plus flag, and I don't think in the immediate future that would be commensurate with a resolution of the crisis. But the fact is that we have the ability to generate the force, to me, is the most important thing. And on the issue, if I may, of capabilities, I think it was Wim said this morning that we spend a lot of money in Europe on defence. Yes, that's right. We spend about 200 billion euros a year. But 50% of that is Britain and France alone. 65% is Britain, France and Germany. 88% of all defence research and technological development in Europe is Britain, France and Germany. We often talk about the transatlantic interoperability gap. What concerns me is the growing European gap, whether you're a partner or a member, because that's the foundation upon which the alliance is established.
Right. Are there more questions? Yeah. Okay.
So, Colonel Paul Duff, I'm the Canadian Defence Attaché accredited to Montenegro. At a technical, I'll put this to Julian and to the Latvian ambassador. At a technical level, the individual partnership action plan is about achieving interoperability. So my question is, where does PFP go? We have added to that pyramid the map on the top, which it goes beyond interoperability. Where does PFP go when all of those partners who want to become members have become members, and those partners, such as Serbia, who've said we're happy staying at the partnership level, have achieved the required level of interoperability where no further partnership goals will achieve anything effectively? And at that point, where does Partnership for Peace go?
Yes, sorry. Julian asked me, is nodding his head. So I think it'll go where the partners want it to go. You know, there's no doubt about that. I think it has to, and that's in many ways that's the success of partnership, because it's an agenda that each of the partners is allowed to utilize to the extent that it wants to. You know, I mentioned Sweden and Finland, and they're very serious partners in PFP, and they are able to contribute in very different ways also to some of the alliance's capabilities. So if Serbia doesn't feel comfortable with that in the long run, then so be it. There are other important partners, Moldova, that I think need to look at, some of the Central Asian countries that are also PFP partners that we need to look at, and and obviously it will be an agreement amongst NATO itself and the individual partner, and I think it's based on very much an individual basis of what the partners themselves want.
But I would add to that, the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative.
Yeah.
We're now extending the alliance experience into our neighbours in the Middle East and indeed beyond, with advice in security sector reform, for democratic control over armed forces. So we're getting very much involved in the conflict prevention part of the conflict cycle, because that's fundamental to peace. We saw the NATO training mission in Iraq. We've established a precedent for assisting governments in reconstruction. We're seeing it with, and I hope we'll see it with resolution support in Afghanistan. It strikes me that within the body of the alliance and the community that's represented by both membership and partnership, we have an unrivaled expertise to engage across the conflict spectrum. And Partnership for Peace must engage the conflict spectrum. Again, that involves relations with the European Union. We've seen situations where NATO supports EU operations. That must indeed continue as CSDP does indeed develop. We've also seen that there are countries like Australia, Japan, South Korea that also want to benefit from not just the brand of the alliance, but also the mechanisms of command and control and force generation, which they've become accustomed to by working with alliance forces. And I think this is hugely important to the United States. If you see the trajectory of US defense expenditure, $620 billion this year, $450 planned by 2020. One of the things that concern me about operations in Afghanistan, and John, please criticize me over this, is that NATO became increasingly a fig leaf for a CENTCOM-led operation. Now, for the United States, it's very tempting always to take that command. But what the alliance gives is political legitimacy, vital for the kind of engagements we operate under. And if we have more and more partners who are engaged alongside allies in operations, it's vital that the multinationality of the identity of the operation reinforces American leadership and not seen as a diminution of it. We will always need American leadership, but political legitimacy is an absolutely essential ingredient of effective engagement in the 21st century, and the alliance affords all of us that legitimacy.
Yeah, first gentleman over here, and then you, General.
Willem van Ekelen. Madam Minister, you, I think, made an important point that you said Partnership for Peace allowed two directions. Either do things which you regarded important for the development of your own forces, and on the other hand, moving perhaps for others or all to NATO membership. Now, to what extent do you think that the need for capabilities has influenced the members of Partnership for Peace? I mean, we drew in EU and NATO, we drew certain lessons. We were short of ground-to-air and air-to-ground reconnaissance. We were short of mid-air refueling. We were short of special forces. And I think that were the main lacunae. Is this sort of thinking, is that percolating through in the membership for peace, Partnership for Peace? Because, as Julian said, it is the collective capability which ultimately you can mobilize. Then certainly Partnership for Peace was successful on the political military side. But was it also successful in mobilizing capabilities or potential capabilities for joint action? And as now most of the Partnership for Peace countries have become members, at least of the old set, shouldn't we focus in future a bit more on the joint capabilities for which both NATO and European Union are short of?
Well, I said already that I do recognize Partnership for Peace as a very broad framework where we are having possibilities for different levels of Euro-Atlantic integrations. And I don't believe that there would be the time when all the countries will become members. That's not the point now, and I don't believe it will be in the future. So there will be always space and interest for going further with developing that concept. Talking about the capabilities and this military dimension of the initiative, I do believe that the main axis of actions are those related with capabilities. The mechanisms we are having inside the Partnership for Peace process are PARP, individual partnership programs, making the whole process having a very, I would say, strong individual dimension. And that is something which makes a difference in comparison with the NATO alliance and any kind of international organization which is structured as such. So giving better options and giving, I would say, more responsibilities for each of the individual partners to recognize in the right way what is the substance of this partnership, what is needed by themselves to address that properly and to find the means to achieve what is important for the particular country. And doing the PAR process, doing the OCC process as well, we are doing through Partnership for Peace as a kind of preparation for the membership in our case, because that is our choice. I think that we achieved a lot. We achieved what hasn't been imaginable some years ago, to have representatives of the armed forces of Montenegro being on equal foot partners in Afghanistan. It's a very complex mission, and touch the wood, I would say, we have been performing very well. We are part of different EU missions. We are part of missions which are also under the auspice of NATO. We are able to gather our forces to help to whatever is in need. We showed that in many occasions. I won't mention the latest one, which was related with that catastrophe that came to Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia. I would say that just 6 years ago, no one would bet that armed forces of Montenegro are capable of providing that kind of capabilities. That's why I do believe that the process is very valuable. We could gain a lot. And of course, there are other means. We could do that on our own. Be alone, do what we recognize as important, but I don't believe in that concept. I really am convinced that in partnership we can gain much more, and we can achieve it much efficiently and much faster.
Thank you.
John? Thank you, Minister. I wanted to thank you for your team and your leadership in hosting so much of this conference. This has been a very, very helpful conference for me in understanding more about Montenegro's interests in NATO, but more broadly, the partners' interests in NATO and becoming a member, and where all of this will go. So I wanted to thank you and commend you for your leadership in all of this. And for Julian, I'll concede that the British did have more landing troops on D-Day. You had 100% of the troops that burned our capital in that moment of unpleasantness, and I will tell you that there's a large number of folks hoping you'll come back and have another go at it at some point in the near future. I want to just emphasize something that you said, which I think is really very important, and I hope we can all, as an alliance, but even more broadly, the community of nations interested in what this is all about. NATO is really much more than simply a military alliance. It has proven itself to be on so many occasions. And we are at this really, I think, extraordinarily important moment in history as we bring the ISAF mission to a close, where we've had 28 NATO members and 22 partners engaged in war shoulder to shoulder now for so many years. When you saw them all together, it was extraordinarily impressive. I mean, it was really impressive. But what you often didn't see was the first ring of nations deeply invested in it, but with no troops in the game, who contributed their national wealth and their integrity and their reputations to this as well. And I think this is really an important moment as we wind this mission down. And as we see great interest, for example, in East Asia about the future and what will become of this relationship, this is a moment where we should seek every opportunity to take advantage of this catalytic moment where NATO has in fact brought together 50 countries with other interested parties to do an important mission on Afghanistan. Now is the chance to see if we can focus this at a systematic and institutional level beyond this. We may not get this opportunity again. And while the crisis in Ukraine has given NATO a new lease on the debate about Article 5, I think we shouldn't miss the opportunity as the ISAF mission comes to a close to see what we can preserve of that common vision that we've all had together, whether it was troops on the ground or massive national investment, to see where this can go in the future. And I would predict that as we in the United States grapple with a really difficult moment for us in remaining true to our Southwest Asia and Middle East commitments and our dear and close friends there, as we attempt to rebalance our national interest and national military presence, et cetera, in East Asia, at the same time remaining true to our commitments to the Atlantic Alliance and to NATO, we need to look at every possible way that we can bring together the nations with a common interest and common values to amplify what we have achieved together. And I will tell you that I was deeply involved in the tsunami, the tsunami relief at 2005, 2004, 2005. And about 20 nations arrived to provide some form of relief to the massively stricken nations of Thailand, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka. And there were substantial command and control difficulties that we all experienced, which I would say today, if we had another humanitarian or disaster relief crisis, that would be fundamentally different. Nations would arrive having created habits of command and control together. We'd have a common operational vocabulary. We would have common expectations. And so I would venture to say that we saved tens of thousands of lives in the relief effort in 2004 and 2005, but had to work through enormous relational and command and control difficulties to do that. Today, it would be completely different. 5 years from now, I fear that we could be back to where we were before. This is that moment, I believe, as ISAF transitions to something else and as NATO takes stock of what it is at the end of 13 years of war. This is that moment where we could really grasp the attention of the international community and leverage this.
Thank you, John. Thank you, sir. We have to finish because we already passed the time we are allowed to. But please, from you, Mr. At the end, what is the future of PFP in 3 sentences and for everybody else?
There is a serious
after all these countries from the partnership now and become members.
There is a
eventually.
serious potential in the mechanism, which has already a long tradition. Sensitivities towards partners. Not all of them have the same vision, not all of them have the same level of ambition, so that's what has to be taken into account. And what General Allen spoke, it's not only partnership, it's not only on defense cooperation, it's also disaster, crisis management, planning, and that's what very rightly General Allen pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you.
1, completion of a Europe whole and free. 2, a strategic partnership for global peace and humanitarian support.
For me, of course, there is no more important thing than the completion of Europe whole and free, and as I said already, a kind of a proof that Partnership for Peace program is something which matters, is something where You are gaining new experiences, you are developing your capabilities, and you are proving at the end that you can be a credible partner in a serious organization as NATO alliances.
Thank you. I don't think there's anything more that can be added apart from, or just to emphasise what General Allen said, because I think now is the opportunity at the Cardiff Summit to make use of this experience, this very important experience in the operation in Afghanistan, and make sure that the opportunity is not wasted, but made use of as you know, and show that partnerships really are extremely important for the alliance as we go ahead.
Thank you all very much. It was very interesting for me. I hope it was interesting to you, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.